I should have known the moment he closed the blinds. In 10 years at that desk, I'd watched managers come and go, projects get blessed and buried, but nobody ever closed the blinds for good news. Still, habit is louder than instinct. You spend a decade telling yourself you're lucky to work with your hands and a clean conscience, and one day you look up and realize the only thing that stayed clean is your conscience. My name's Ethan. I build things that don't fall down. I don't gossip, I don't posture, and until this week I thought that was enough. I'm not the type who lights up a room. My skill set is unsexy. Load paths, submittals, RFIs, value engineering without gutting safety. My badge still sticks on the first tap because the film on the plastic's worn down. People like me keep schedules alive in the background. We fix mistakes quietly and bring coffee to inspectors who don't like surprises. It's not martyrdom, it's the job. I grew up sweeping sawdust from my dad's boots and learning the difference between being right and proving it. 10 years here, 4 job trailers, 3 hard hats, 1 back that whines when the weather shifts. Nothing flashy. Then Mason arrived. He was one of those hires that make the group chat go quiet for a day. Early 30s, consultant pedigree, watch without numbers, smile that asks for favors while pretending it didn't. His resume was a buzzword salad, operationalizing outcomes, stakeholder cadence, narrative decks. And the first week he stood next to the model, in the conference room like he'd built it with a pen. He didn't look at beams, he looked at faces. He'd laugh before a joke landed, and made every meeting feel like a pitch for something you hadn't agreed to buy. People who like short roads to long titles tend to like Mason. For 6 months he floated over our work like a drone, just high enough to avoid sweat, just low enough to claim the view. He'd wander by my station, clap the back of my chair, call me E like we were old friends, and ask for the quick version of anything that took weeks to get right. If I pushed back, he'd tilt his head like a coach, about to say something motivational. "I'm protecting you from detail," he said once, smiling. "Executives need headlines." That was the first time I felt tired around him, not because of the words, but because of the way he held them like a leash. He learned the project names without learning the projects. He moved milestones on slides like magnets on a fridge, and told the client we were accelerating certainty. When we hit a snag with the moment connections on the parking structure, he pitched it to the room as a calculated delay to align trades, and then he thanked me for hustling in the shadows. I remember the phrasing because it was the moment I understood. He needed my competence the way a kite needs wind. It keeps the show in the air, but the string gets no applause. He got promoted fast. Interim director, then just director, same office, better chair, different email signature. My name started showing up under his updates as the person driving items he'd never read. He'd CC me late at night with lines like, "E will fill you in," after selling a decision I hadn't seen. If you've ever had your own work explained to you by someone who skimmed it on a plane, you know the mix of insult and inertia that makes you nod instead of yell. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. We were delivering. The steel was up. The client smiled on walkthroughs. Let the talkers talk. The first real pull on the leash came with a Friday huddle. That wasn't on my calendar. He called me into his office at 6:10 p.m., the hour when the building takes a breath, and even the printer sounds polite. He closed the door with 2 fingers, then the blinds with the kind of care people reserve for things they think they own. On his desk, 2 manila folders, my name misspelled on one tab. He gestured to the chair like a maitre d'. "Got a quick one for you, E. End of quarter admin. You know the drill." I stood instead. Habit. I think better on my feet. He took it as a challenge. "Relax," he said, smiling. "You're about to make my weekend." He slid the first folder over. Change orders. Just acknowledging what you've already shepherded. We're consolidating signatures to streamline closeout. Legal's pushing everyone through this. Claire from upstairs will thank us. Claire from upstairs was the CEO's assistant. People who say her name that way usually don't know her. I flipped the top page. It looked like a digest. Project number, list of COs, a line for initials next to each summary. Nothing I hadn't signed 100 times. He'd highlighted my lines. He'd also placed a pen in the highlight, like a bookmark, with ink. I read anyway, not because I distrusted him, because that's what you do before your name becomes a fact. The language was bland, the kind of bland that hides sharp edges. "You okay?" he asked. His smile didn't change. His eyes checked the clock. "Yeah," I said, "it's just late." "Exactly," he said, cheerful. "Get me out of here." I initialed the summaries I recognized, scribbled my name on the acknowledgement page, dated the top. He watched like I was pouring him a drink. "Perfect," he said, already reaching for the second folder. "And this one's the HR piece. We're cleaning up reporting lines post-promotion. You'll roll up to me formally. Already true in practice, right? And it lets me put your name at the top of some deliverables you keep saving. Win-win." He didn't open that folder. He just placed it on the first one like a lid on a pot and tapped the top with a pen. I lifted it anyway. The first page wore HR's polite typography. Statement of acknowledgement in bold, followed by paragraphs in the exact flavor of English that tells you nothing while taking everything. "Standard," he said, tilting the pen toward me. "Just confirming you're aware of the org chart update and the IP assignments for the phase. Legal's consolidating IP, so we don't have to chase 10 names for every client request. You know how it is." "I do know how it is. IP in our world is a tug-of-war between project names and people's work. Our company standard assigns rights to the company. Attribution lives in the binder of who did what and when. That binder lives in people's heads more than in a cabinet. You protect it by acting like a person whose name belongs in it." "Let me take this home," I said, still reading. "I'll bring it back Monday." He laughed softly, like I'd told a joke that needed kindness. "Come on, E, it's Friday. HR clocks out. I need to timestamp it tonight so procurement can trigger a vendor onboarding on Monday. You want new welders that pass inspection, right? Help me help you." He'd tied my signature to someone else's paycheck and wrapped it in urgency. Classic move. I kept reading. The third paragraph shifted tone. More legalese. Less HR. There was language about assignment of contributions to programmatic assets, vague enough to cover a city. I felt a small tap in my chest. Not panic. Just the sense that a floorboard had a hollow sound I'd never heard before. "Do I get a copy?" I asked. "Of course," he said, and smiled too quickly. "I'll scan it to PDF and fire it off. I've got the scanner warmed up. Page 1 of adulting. Document everything." He was so comfortable with his own lie that it almost felt like the truth. I reminded myself this was my workplace, not a courtroom. I reminded myself I am a man who signs things with his eyes open. I slowed down. I read lines twice. The sentences were gray fog, but they all rolled in the same direction, away from names and toward departments. He tapped the pen again. "E, you've done 10 of these. Don't make me order pizza. My wife will kill me." He wasn't married. He'd told that story last week to a client who wore a wedding band like a badge. People like Mason borrow details that make them look relatable. They spend them and forget the change. I put the pen on the paper and asked the question that always makes men like him show you who they are. "If it's so standard, why are we doing it in your office at 6:30 on a Friday with the blinds down?" He didn't blink. "Because I don't want to be here at 7. That answer is what got me. Not the charm or the push, just the laziness, the normalcy. He'd made my caution sound dramatic. That's how people steal from quiet men. They make prudence look like paranoia. I signed where he'd tabbed, a neat signature that has fixed more problems than it's created. He snapped the folders together with a small, satisfied sound like a jar lid sealing. "Legend," he said. "I owe you." He stood, shook my hand like a politician on election night, and walked me to the door. His palm was dry, his grip warm, his smile perfect. In the hallway, the fluorescents hummed like they always do. The cleaning crew's cart clicked past the elevators. lemon and dust in its wake. I tucked my badge into my pocket and tried to remember when my name had started feeling like something other people touched without asking. I told myself I'd email HR on Monday to get a copy, just to put it in my own folder. I told myself a lot of things men tell themselves when they'd rather keep their heads down than raise their voice. On the way out, I stopped by the model. The parking structure looked small from this angle, like a toy you could blow on and move. I checked the notes someone had taped to the base. Erection sequence arrows sketched in pencil. My handwriting. My habit of underlining what matters. It's strange, the things that steady you when you feel a floor tilt. You look for your lines in the world and hope they're still straight. The lobby was nearly empty. The security guard nodded without standing. Outside, the air had that end-of-week looseness. People talking about nothing important. Cars idling while someone checked a text. I stood on the curb for a minute and watched the building glow like a calm machine. 10 years inside it had taught me to trust systems more than moods. That night, I chose trust over instinct and drove home with the radio off, telling myself I'd read the PDF when it hit my inbox, and sleep on it before deciding if anything felt wrong. When I parked, my phone buzzed once, then went quiet. I didn't look. I was tired in the way you get when you've been useful all day and remembered to be small. In the morning, I made coffee, watered the plant I keep because it forces me to notice light, and checked my email. No PDF, no subject line with my name, just calendars, invoices, a safety bulletin about ladders. I told myself scanners break and people forget. I told myself it was Saturday. I told myself I'd follow up Monday and that would be that. I folded the page in my head where the pen had felt a shade too heavy and put it away, because that's what I'm trained to do with discomfort. Box it, label it, keep working. That's the honest part. I didn't think I'd signed away anything but an hour of my time. I didn't think about what a signature becomes once it leaves your hand. I didn't think about the blinds. Monday started like any other. Stale coffee, inbox chaos, and that quiet relief of routine after a weekend, where your mind chews on the same worry until it dulls. Except this time, the worry had a name. Mason. I came in early, like always. Parking lot half empty, sun low enough to hit the windows sideways. My badge beeped green at the front gate, but when I reached the main door, the reader blinked red. Once, twice, I tried again. Red. The guard, Mike, who's seen me carry blueprints bigger than his desk, raised a brow. System acting up again? I asked. He frowned. Dunno, man. Try HR. It sounded casual, but I saw the shift in his eyes. That flicker of someone realizing they shouldn't have said something. Inside, the elevator didn't need my badge. HR was on 3. The door opened to that clean, lemon-scented quiet that only HR offices have. Morning, I said to the front desk clerk. She froze like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Hi, Ethan. You, should talk to Hannah. Hannah, head of HR. Warm smile, quick handshake, good memory for birthdays. She came out of her office with a manila folder already in her hand. Not a good sign. Ethan, she started softly, can we step inside for a second? You know that cold, metallic stillness that hits when your gut gets the memo before your head does? That's what the air felt like. I followed her in. She gestured for me to sit, but I didn't. I'm sorry, she said, opening the folder. This morning we processed your resignation. IT disabled your access. I stared at her. My what? She blinked. Your resignation, it's signed, effective immediately. It took me a second to even understand the sentence. That's not possible, I said, calm, factual. I didn't resign. She flipped a few pages and turned the document toward me. There it was. My name, my signature, dated Friday evening. My handwriting, my pen, my damn ink. She spoke softly, like to a patient. It also includes an assignment of IP rights for the Ridgefield project, to Mason's department. Her words blurred. I leaned closer, scanning the paper. The layout was familiar. The lines were mine, but the content was a Frankenstein patchwork of what I'd signed and what I hadn't. There, halfway down the page, a paragraph I'd never seen. I, the undersigned, voluntarily resign from my current position effective immediately, transferring ownership and authorship of current project deliverables to the Director of Operations, Mason Hale, for continuation and completion. It looked official, cold, unquestionable. I felt my pulse in my ears. Hannah, this isn't... Ethan, I know, she interrupted gently. But the system recorded it Friday at 6:42 p.m. Mason submitted it personally. HR processed it first thing this morning. I opened my mouth, but nothing useful came out. Just the soft sound of disbelief, trying to find shape. I didn't sign a resignation. He said it was an org update. I managed finally. Hannah sighed, not annoyed, but tired. Look, off the record, you should talk to legal. But until then, I can't reinstate access. It's locked. I nodded, more to stop my hands from shaking than anything else. Can I at least get a copy? Of course. She printed one. Her eyes didn't meet mine. I walked out with that single piece of paper, warm from the printer, heavier than it should have been. By noon, I'd driven home. I didn't go inside, just sat in the car, reading the document again and again, like repetition could turn it back into what it was. It couldn't. The sun hit the windshield, making the text blur and fade. I tried to trace the timeline in my head. Mason, the folders, the blinds, his smile when I signed. Every detail now felt staged. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then it buzzed again. Same number. I answered. Mr. Carter? A woman's voice, calm, professional. This is Claire. I'm calling on behalf of the CEO, Mr. Dalton. My throat tightened. Yeah? There's been a situation regarding the Ridgefield file. The board would like you to come in tomorrow morning, 10 sharp. A dozen questions piled behind my teeth, but I only managed, Am I being sued? Not that I'm aware of, she said evenly. Just be here. Conference room B. The call ended. I sat there, engine off, phone in my lap, the silence louder than any engine. That night, I didn't eat, just poured myself a glass of water and stared at the email inbox on my phone. My company email was gone. My personal one was empty except for spam and receipts. The only message worth reading was the one in my head. You knew something was wrong when he closed the blinds. At 2 a.m., I pulled out the paper again. At the bottom corner, faint and small, the company's legal watermark, 4 pages total. The copy I'd signed had 3. The resignation was page 2. The IP transfer was page 3. But this one ended on page 3, no page 4. Morning came with that nervous energy that feels like standing before a storm. Everything calm, but nothing safe. I ironed a shirt I hadn't worn since last year's company banquet and drove back downtown. Mason's car was already in the executive lot. Black Audi, spotless. Of course. Upstairs, Claire greeted me at reception. Immaculate posture, soft voice, eyes that don't miss much. She led me to the glass conference room. The CEO was there. So was Mason, and a man I didn't recognize. Suit, no tie, briefcase near his foot. Claire nodded at me and closed the door. Mason smiled, first. Man, sorry about the confusion. Total paperwork mix-up. Legal just wants to clarify some signatures, that's all. I didn't answer, just sat down. My palms left faint prints on the polished table. The CEO, Mr. Dalton, looked at me for a long time before speaking. Ethan, I appreciate you coming in. This should take only a few minutes. His tone was calm, but his eyes weren't. The man with the briefcase finally spoke. Mr. Carter, I'm corporate counsel. We just need to confirm a few details regarding these documents. He slid a stack across the table, copies of the same forms I'd signed. Mason leaned back, arms crossed. Wearing that easy grin of someone convinced the show's already over, the lawyer flipped the pages with deliberate care. You signed this, correct? I did, I said, but I didn't read that paragraph. It wasn't... Understood, the lawyer said, And Mr. Hale, you submitted these? Standard HR routing, Mason said smoothly. He wanted me to process it while he was out. We were both rushing to close quarter end. I didn't even notice the typo in his title until later. Mr. Dalton's hand tapped once on the table. Tap, tap, like a gavel. Mason, he said quietly, did you read all the pages before submitting them? Mason laughed, that light, performative laugh he used in client calls. Of course, standard forms. HR template, 4 pages, signature on the last one. 4 pages, the CEO repeated, glancing at me. Ethan, the copy HR printed for you had... How many? 3, I said. Dalton's mouth twitched, almost like a smile, trying to escape restraint. Interesting. The lawyer slid one more sheet from the bottom of the stack. Then, Mr. Hale, perhaps you'd like to read page 4 again? Mason's grin faltered just slightly, like a record skipping. He took the page, turned it over, and his eyes started moving. Halfway through the first paragraph, his jaw tightened. The lawyer's voice was calm, but it carried weight. Page 4 was inserted after the executive review last quarter. All directors were notified. It stipulates that any document signed under duress or misrepresentation immediately nullifies the submission and transfers full control of project IP to the original lead. Dalton leaned forward, elbows on the table. You made him sign it, didn't you? Mason opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. He knew what it was. It's standard! Dalton didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Page 4 makes it not standard. I sat still, breathing slow. The lawyer's pen tapped once. Effective immediately, all assets and credit for Ridgefield revert to Mr. Carter, and your access, Mr. Hale, is suspended pending review. Mason stared down at the paper as if it had turned radioactive. That's when I realized the sound filling the room wasn't the HVAC hum. It was his breathing, fast, uneven. For once, he couldn't talk his way out of it. His voice finally failed him. But that wasn't the real punishment. He didn't speak, not for a full 30 seconds. Mason just stared at that page, like maybe if he read it hard enough, it would start saying something else. But the ink didn't move. The lawyer leaned back, expression neutral. The kind people in his line of work wear when the ending is already written. Mr. Dalton folded his hands on the table. Mason, he said, low and measured, do you understand what this means? Mason swallowed. Sir, there must be... I was told... You were told, Dalton repeated, to follow procedure. Instead, you forced a signature under false pretense, concealed material language, and filed it as voluntary resignation. That's not a mix-up. That's fraud. The word landed like a pin dropped in water, quiet but deep. Mason shifted, his polished confidence cracking in small, visible pieces. No, look, that clause, that wasn't in the last template I saw. It's been in effect since last fiscal, the lawyer said evenly. It's designed to protect project leads from coercion. He paused. We didn't expect to need it quite so soon. Dalton slid the papers into a single neat stack and closed the folder. You've got 5 minutes to collect your things. Security will escort you out. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Mason stood slowly, face pale, throat tight. His hand brushed his tie like he'd forgotten what to do with it. You can't just... I can, Dalton said, and I did. Mason's gaze flicked to me, quick, sharp, like a reflex. There was no arrogance left, only disbelief. Ethan, you knew? I met his eyes. I knew you liked blinds closed. He blinked hard, like he didn't understand the sentence, then looked back to the CEO, searching for some kind of mercy. None came. Claire opened the door. 2 security guards waited outside, polite but solid. Mason walked past them, slower than usual, like gravity had doubled. His shoes echoed down the hall, the sound shrinking until the door sealed behind him. The lawyer exhaled softly. That clause saved us a lawsuit, he said, almost to himself. Dalton looked at me. Ethan, sit. I did. My legs finally remembered how. He slid a new folder across the table. Thinner, clean, with my name spelled right this time. "We've been watching Mason for a while," Dalton said. "You're not the first person he's tried to corner, but you were the first one who signed something that gave us proof. We suspected manipulation. No paper trail. Until Friday." He paused. "You did the right thing by reading the first few pages. Most people wouldn't have even noticed the formatting. Page 4 was our insurance. It triggers an automatic review if a director submits paperwork signed under non-standard conditions." I stared at the folder. My own name looked foreign now, like a version of me that didn't know better yet. "So what happens now?" I asked. Dalton nodded to the lawyer. "Your resignation is void. You're reinstated, effective immediately. All IP related to Ridgefield remains in your ownership as lead designer. HR will issue an amended acknowledgement reflecting that. Mason's termination will be recorded as misconduct." I let the words settle. They didn't feel like victory, more like oxygen after too long underwater. Dalton's tone softened. "Ethan, I know this isn't the kind of justice that feels loud, but it's the kind that lasts." He stood, extending his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, deliberate. "You built something worth keeping. We intend to keep it. And you." The lawyer gathered the papers and nodded to me. "If you'd like to file an ethics statement for the record, we can add it to his case. Or you can leave it as is." I thought about it. I think page 4 says enough. When I stepped back into the hallway, the building felt different. The hum of the vents, the flicker of the lights, everything sharper, clearer. Mason's office door stood open. Inside, a box sat on his desk, half filled with the props of a man who thought charm was currency. Sleek pen, silver mug, framed quote that said, "Work hard, win harder." Claire passed by, arms full of folders. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Getting there." She smiled faintly. He thought that clause was just corporate fluff. We told him to read it months ago. I raised an eyebrow. "He didn't?" She shook her head. "He liked shortcuts." I spent the rest of the day in my old office. The same chair, same blueprints, same stubborn coffee stain on the desk. But it all looked different, not newer, just honest. Around 5, I opened my inbox. Hundreds of unread emails blinked back to life. One caught my eye, time-stamped Saturday morning, from an address labeled Legal Notices Internal. Subject: Confirmation of Executive Addendum. Page 4. Activation. Attached was a single PDF. I opened it. It was the clause. Bolded this time. Signed by Dalton and Legal. The last line read, "All coercive submissions are self-reversing upon verification. Any loss of position or access resulting from such actions shall be considered voluntary resignation by the coercing party." Voluntary resignation, that's what HR had called mine. Now it was his. I stayed late, mostly because I didn't know where else to go. The office emptied, lights dimmed. The hum turned soft again. Outside, I could see Mason's Audi still in the lot, a tow truck parked beside it, flashing lights reflecting off the glass. He was standing nearby, talking fast into his phone, one hand gripping the side mirror like it owed him something. I watched for a moment, not out of cruelty, just closure. He'd spent months trying to own what he didn't build. Now he was watching it drive away. I shut off my monitor, gathered my things, and walked out. The night air smelled clean. On the way home, I stopped at a small diner off the freeway. The waitress didn't ask if I wanted coffee. She just poured it, like she knew I needed something that made sense. I sat there, replaying the last few days. The blinds, the signatures, the way truth always moves slower than deceit, but still catches up. The bell above the door chimed, and for a second I thought about Mason again. How someone like him could twist a signature, a system, a person's trust until it snapped. But maybe that's why page 4 existed. Someone, somewhere knew that trust needed its own insurance. When I left the diner, my phone buzzed. A new email from HR. Confirmation of reinstatement complete. Compensation adjustments pending. Please confirm new title, Senior Project Director. I stared at it. For once, no emotion came. Just a slow exhale, the kind that empties everything that's been sitting heavy. I replied with 2 words. Confirmed. Thanks. That night, as I shut off the lights in my apartment, I thought about something Dalton said. About quiet justice. He was right. Revenge isn't fire, it's air. You don't see it coming, but when it fills the room, the ones who can't breathe always know. They thought I'd lost everything that Friday night. They didn't know the only thing I signed away was my silence. But that wasn't the real punishment. The next morning, the office was quiet. Too quiet for a Wednesday. When I walked in, people looked up from their screens, then quickly back down. That kind of silence doesn't come from fear. It comes from confirmation. Everyone had already heard. Mason's nameplate was gone. His office had been cleared overnight. Drawers empty, plants gone, that stupid framed quote, "Work hard, win harder," leaning against the trash bin near the copier. Someone had already taken the pen. I set my bag down, logged in, and opened the latest memo from legal. One line stood out. Following investigation, all current projects and assets formerly under Director Hale are reassigned to Senior Project Director Ethan Carter, effective immediately. It didn't feel like victory, just gravity finally balancing itself. By noon, HR held a short meeting in the conference room. Short, formal, the kind where people keep their hands folded. The lawyer read a statement. Mason had violated compliance policy, fabricated authorization, and was dismissed for cause. The words hung in the air like disinfectant. Sterile, absolute. When it ended, people shuffled papers, murmured a few polite comments. No celebration, no applause. Just quiet acknowledgement. Because the truth is, most people had known something was wrong for a long time. They just didn't want to look directly at it. Claire caught me afterward in the hallway. "You know," she said softly, "he tried to throw you under the bus during the review. Claimed you'd gone rogue with procurement. Dalton didn't buy it." I raised an eyebrow. "He tried to make it stick?" She smiled faintly. "He's good at making messes. Bad at reading the fine print." We both laughed, the kind of small, tired laugh that comes after a storm's passed, but the smell of rain still lingers. That evening, Dalton called me into his office. No lawyers this time, no folders. Just him, a manila envelope, and 2 cups of black coffee. He handed me the envelope. "Inside are your new contracts and a one-time compensation bonus. We don't do this often, but we do when it's earned." I nodded, keeping my voice even. "Thank you, sir." He leaned back, studying me. "You didn't try to fight him. You didn't make noise. You let the system expose him. That's rare." "I just did my job," I said. He smiled. "Exactly." Before I left, he added, "You know, Mason will land somewhere. Guys like him always do. But the kind of reputation he's built, it follows louder than his resume." I nodded. "That's his punishment." Dalton looked at me, something between pride and pity in his expression. "No. His punishment is waking up every day knowing the people he wanted to impress know exactly who he is now." Weeks passed. The air in the office cleared. People laughed louder, worked later because they wanted to, not because someone demanded it. The Ridgefield project was back on schedule. We hit inspection targets. The client renewed their next phase, and the crew signed the beam with fresh markers before it went up. When I stood beneath it, looking at my name beside everyone else's, I didn't feel pride. I felt peace. Then one morning I got an email. Subject line, "Hey, can we talk?" No name, but I knew the address. Mason. The message was short. "I made mistakes. I want to make things right. Can we meet for coffee?" I stared at it for a while, thought about all the ways I could reply, the clever lines, the moral ones, the cold silence. Then I just typed, "No need." Page 4, already did, and I hit send. Later that week, I took a walk to the construction site. The noise, the smell of steel and dust, the familiar rhythm of people building something real, it always grounded me. One of the guys handed me a hard hat, same as always. "Good to have you back, boss," I smiled. "Good to be back," he grinned. "Heard about Mason. Rough way to go." "Yeah," I said, watching the crane move a beam into place. "Some lessons don't come cheap." The wind caught the edges of my vest. For a moment, I thought about that Friday evening, the blinds closing, the pen tapping, the way my own trust almost signed me out of my life. Almost. That night, I sat at a small cafe a few blocks from my apartment, the kind of place where nobody cares who you are or what title sits under your name. I ordered black coffee, same as always, and watched the city move. Steady, indifferent, alive. A thought came quietly, the kind that doesn't need to be written down. Justice isn't loud, it's patient. It waits in the margins, sometimes on page 4. When I left, I turned off my phone, walked home, and for the first time in months, slept straight through the night. In the end, Mason lost everything he tried to steal. The title, the credit, the illusion of control. And me? I got something better. Peace. Real peace. The kind you can't fake, can't file, can't forge. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. Because sometimes karma doesn't come roaring through the front door. Sometimes it just sits quietly on page 4, waiting for you to read it.